Below is an expanded version of the YouTube video script, rewritten to reach approximately 9,000 words, while preserving the emotional core, themes, and structure of the original narrative. To achieve the desired length, I've deepened sensory, descriptions, extended internal reflections, added more dialogue, incorporated additional scenes, and fleshed out character backstories and relationships. The tone remains heartfelt and inspirational, with the English practice encouragement intact at the end. The script avoids headings, as requested, and builds on the previously rewritten version's modernized, concise style, while significantly increasing the word count to meet your requirement. 12 years ago, I was 19, standing behind the counter of a small cafe in my village, my hands dusted with flour from slicing cakes and my apron streaked with coffee stains. The cafe was a warm, cluttered haven, its walls adorned with faded photographs of the village from decades past, horses pulling carts, women in aprons, men in flat caps. The air was thick with the scent of roasted coffee beans, buttery pastries, and the faint tang of lemon from the cakes we baked fresh each morning. Wooden tables wobbled under the weight of mismatched mugs, their surfaces etched with years of scratches and coffee rings. A small radio in the corner crackled with pop songs or local news, and the bell above the door jingled with every customer. Farmers in mud-stained boots, shopkeepers with tired smiles, the occasional traveler seeking a quick rest stop. I worked there every day after school, balancing trays of cappuccinos, lattes, and plates of Victoria sponge while stealing glances at my textbooks tucked behind the counter. The job was demanding. Sore feet, spilled drinks, the occasional rude customer, but I loved it. It was my window to the world, a place where I could eavesdrop on lives beyond my own, gossip about the harvest, stories of city adventures, dreams whispered over steaming cups. At 19, I was still finding my place, caught between the comfort of my small life and a restless yearning for something bigger, something I couldn't yet name. The village was a quiet speck on the map, nestled between rolling fields of wheat and dense forests that whispered with the wind. Its single main street was lined with a bakery that smelled of warm bread, a hardware store where my father worked, and a post office that doubled as the village's gossip hub. Everyone knew everyone, and secrets were as fleeting as morning mist. My family lived in a modest house at the edge of town, its whitewashed walls peeling slightly, its garden a riot of wildflowers, daisies, clover, and poppies that swayed in the breeze. My mother, a soft-spoken woman with a knack for baking, filled our kitchen with the aroma of sourdough and apple pies. My father, stern but loving, spent his days selling nails and paint, his hands calloused from years of labor, his evenings spent reading the newspaper with a frown. My older sister, Maria, 3 years my senior, was a seamstress, her fingers nimble with needle and thread, her laughter bright, but her warnings sharp. They were my anchors, tethering me to a world that felt both safe and stifling. I'd grown up climbing oak trees, reading novels by flashlight under my blankets, and dreaming of places I'd only seen in library books, cities with glittering skylines, oceans that stretched to the horizon, markets alive with color and chaos. Leaving the village, though, seemed impossible, a step too vast for a girl like me, whose biggest adventure was a school trip to the next town. The cafe was my escape, a place where I could be more than just Maya, the quiet daughter, the diligent student. I'd tie my hair back, slip on my apron, and become part of the village's pulse, serving coffee with a smile, memorizing orders, and chatting with regulars who treated me like family. There was Mrs. Carter, who always ordered chamomile tea and told stories of her youth, Mr. Ellis, the butcher, who tipped extra when his football team won, and Sophie, a young mother who brought her toddler and left crumbs on the table, but always thanked me with a tired grin. Each interaction was a thread in the tapestry of my days, weaving a sense of purpose I couldn't find at school or home. I was good at it, remembering who liked extra sugar, who preferred their toast barely browned, and the praise from Mrs. Patel, my boss, made me glow. "You're a natural, Maya," she'd say, her eyes crinkling. "This place wouldn't run without you." Among the regulars was a man who stood out like a flame in a storm. His name was Lucas, 26, the only son of a wealthy family who owned half the businesses in town, including a motorcycle shop on the main street, its windows gleaming with chrome and leather. Lucas was impossible to ignore. Tall, with dark hair that fell in careless waves, a leather jacket that hugged his frame, and a smile that felt like a secret shared just with you. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew the world bent to his will, his presence commanding attention without effort. The village buzzed with stories about him, his charm, his wealth, his rumored flings with girls who fell hard and fast. Girls at the market whispered his name, their giggles trailing like perfume. Boys envied his swagger, his sleek black car, his ability to walk into any room and own it. Lucas always sat at table 5, near the window, where sunlight caught the angles of his face as he scrolled through his phone or watched the street with a lazy grin. He ordered the same thing every time. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream, served in the cafe's chipped blue mug. He'd leave a tip so generous it felt like a performance, slipping the bills under his saucer with a wink. "Best coffee in the village, Maya," he'd say, my name rolling off his tongue like a melody. I'd blush, fumble with the coffee pot, and retreat to the counter, my heart a wild drumbeat in conservatism chest. Lucas's attention was intoxicating, a spotlight that made me feel seen in a way I'd never been before. He didn't just order and leave like most customers. He'd linger, leaning back in his chair, asking about my day, commenting on the book peeking out from my bag, Jane Eyre one week, The Great Gatsby the next. "You read a lot," he said once, his eyes curious. "What's that one about?" I'd stammer through an explanation, surprised he cared, and he'd listen, nodding like my words mattered. He noticed the smallest things, how I tied my apron with a double knot, how I hummed when I thought no one was listening, how I'd doodle flowers on spare napkins during slow shifts. "You've got a good voice," he said one afternoon, catching me mid-tune as I wiped down tables. I laughed, embarrassed, but his words stayed with me, warming me through the rest of my shift. No one else in the village saw me that way. Not my classmates, who thought I was too studious. Not my parents, who saw me as their dutiful daughter. Not even Sophia, my best friend since we were 6, who loved me but was too busy with her own dreams to notice mine. To them, I was reliable Maya, quiet Maya, the girl who worked hard and stayed out of trouble. To Lucas, I felt like someone extraordinary, someone with a story worth telling. But my family saw a different Lucas. My father's face would tighten whenever his name came up, his fork pausing mid-bite at the dinner table. "That boy thinks he's better than everyone," he'd say, his voice low and hard. "All flash, no substance. Stay away from him, Maya." I'd nod, picking at my potatoes, but his warnings felt like overprotective noise. My father didn't know Lucas, not really. He hadn't seen the way Lucas listened when I talked about my dreams, the way his eyes softened when he said my name. Maria was even more direct. One night, as we sat on the porch braiding each other's hair, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine, she fixed me with a look. "Lucas is trouble," she said, her fingers pausing in my hair. "He dates a girl for 2 weeks, maybe 3, then drops her like she's nothing. He broke Clara's heart last summer. She cried for weeks, Maya. Don't let him fool you with that smile." Clara was Maria's friend, a sweet girl who worked at the bakery and hadn't been the same since Lucas moved on. I murmured something vague, promising to be careful, but inside, I pushed her words away. Lucas wasn't like that with me. He was different, gentler, more real. I wasn't some naive girl he could toy with. I was special to him. I had to be. One quiet afternoon, the cafe nearly empty, Lucas stayed past his usual time, nursing his coffee while I swept the floor. The radio played a soft pop song, its melody weaving through the hum of the espresso machine, and sunlight slanted through the windows, dusting the air with gold. I was lost in my thoughts, the broom's rhythm, steady when Lucas's voice cut through. "Maya," he said, leaning back in his chair, "can I have your phone number? I'd love to talk sometime outside this place." My breath caught. I stopped sweeping, the broom still in my hands, and met his gaze. His eyes were steady, warm, like he meant it. My heart raced, a mix of excitement and nerves, and I set the broom against the wall, grabbing a napkin from the counter. I scribbled, "My number, the pen smudging slightly, and slid the napkin across the table. "Here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, my cheeks burning. He grinned, tucking the napkin into his leather jacket. "I'll call you," he said, and the promise felt like a spark, igniting something new, something dangerous. That night, I was in my room, sprawled on my bed with a dog-eared copy of Pride and Prejudice, the pages soft from countless readings. My room was small, its walls covered in posters of far-off places, Paris, New York, Tokyo, and a single shelf sagged under the weight of my books. A breeze slipped through the open window, carrying the scent of grass and distant rain. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and Lucas's name flashed on the screen. My stomach flipped. I answered, my voice unsteady, and we talked for 2 hours. He asked about my life, school, the cafe, what I wanted for the future. I told him about my love for books, how I'd always wanted to be a teacher, to share stories with kids and help them see the world through words. He listened, his voice warm through the phone, asking questions that made me feel heard. "You're different, Maya," he said. "You've got dreams. Most people here don't." His words were a balm, soothing the part of me that felt trapped in the village's smallness. Then he told me about his travels, Barcelona's crowded markets, where vendors shouted in Spanish and sold oranges as bright as the sun. New York's skyscrapers, their lights like stars brought to earth. Tokyo's neon-lit streets, alive with music and chaos. I'd never left the village, never even been on a plane, and his stories were like windows to a world I could barely imagine. I pictured myself in those places, walking beside him, my sneakers on foreign pavement, my eyes wide with wonder. "You'd love it out there, Maya," he said. "You're too big for this place." His words lit something inside me, a flicker of possibility I'd kept buried under duty and fear. We talked until my voice grew hoarse, until the stars outside my window faded into dawn. When we hung up, I lay awake, my mind buzzing with his stories, my heart tangled in a mix of hope and caution. The next weekend, Lucas texted me. "Music. Festival in the next town. Wanna go?" My heart raced at the idea. A festival sounded magical. Lights, music, a chance to step out of my routine and into the world Lucas described. But I knew my parents would never agree. Not with Lucas, not even for a day trip. They barely let me go to the next village without a lecture about safety and curfews. So I lied, something I'd never done before. I told them I was going with Sophia, that we'd be back by midnight, that it was just a harmless girls' night. Guilt churned in my gut as I packed a small bag, a sweater, my phone, a little cash, but the thought of Lucas waiting for me pushed it aside. I met him at the edge of the village, where his black car gleamed under a streetlight, its sleek lines a contrast to the village's dusty roads. He opened the door for me, his smile as dazzling as ever, and we drove off, the radio blasting indie rock I didn't know but instantly loved. The wind whipped through the open windows, tangling my hair, and for the first time I felt free. The festival was a sensory overload, a riot of color, sound, and life. 3 stages pulsed with music, grungy guitars, thumping bass, ethereal vocals, while fairy lights and strobes flashed across the crowd. People danced in clusters, their laughter mingling with the melodies, their bodies swaying under a sky streaked with stars. Food trucks lined the edges, selling spicy tacos, bubble tea, and cotton candy, dusted with edible glitter. The air was thick with the smells of grilled corn, perfume, and sweat, a heady mix that made my pulse race. Lucas held my hand as we navigated. The chaos, his grip steady, grounding. We danced to a band neither of us knew, our bodies close, our laughter lost in the music. I felt like I'd stepped into a dream, a version of myself I hadn't met yet, bold, free, alive. We shared a plate of nachos, the cheese dripping onto our fingers, and when he wiped a smudge from my cheek, his touch was gentle, his eyes warm. "You're stunning tonight," he said, his breath warm against my ear over the music. I flushed, my denim jacket and sneakers feeling too ordinary for the compliment. No one had ever called me stunning. Not my parents, not my friends, not even the boys at school who'd barely noticed me. With Lucas, I was someone new, someone who belonged in this vibrant, electric world. As the festival wound down, the crowd thinning and the stages going dark, Lucas turned to me, his watch glinting under the fairy lights. "It's late," he said, his voice casual but deliberate. "My family has a cabin by the lake, not far from here. We could crash there instead of driving back. Watch the sunrise over the water." My stomach tightened. I was supposed to be home by midnight, and a cabin sounded serious, intimate. I'd never spent the night away from home, not like this, not with a man. My parents' rules echoed, in my mind, along with Maria's warnings about Lucas's reputation. But the idea of a sunrise with him, the romance of it, was irresistible. I imagined us sitting by the lake, wrapped in blankets, talking until dawn, the water reflecting the first light of day. It felt like a scene from one of my novels, a moment that could change everything. I pulled out my phone and texted Sophia. "Cover for me if my parents call. Staying out late." Her reply came quickly. "Be careful, Maya, seriously." I ignored the warning, my thumb hovering over the send button before I pocketed the phone. "Okay," I told Lucas, my voice steadier than I felt. "Let's go." The drive to the cabin was quiet, the festival's energy fading into the hum of the car and the dark blur of trees outside. The road twisted through the mountains, the air growing cooler, sharper. Lucas was silent, his hands steady on the wheel, and I wondered if he felt the same mix of excitement and nerves that churned in my chest. The cabin was small but charming, a single-room retreat with a stone fireplace, a sagging couch, and windows. Overlooking the lake, its surface glinting under the moon like a sheet of glass. Inside, it smelled of pine and dust, the kind of place that held memories of summer vacations and family retreats. Lucas lit a fire, the flames casting flickering shadows on the walls, and the room filled with the crackle of burning wood and a warmth that chased away the night's chill. We sat on the couch, a wool blanket draped over our knees, and talked about the festival, the songs we'd loved, the lives we wanted. He asked about my dreams again, and I told him about wanting to teach, to travel, to write stories of my own someday. He listened, his arm resting lightly around my shoulders, and I leaned into him, my nerves dancing but my heart full. "I've liked you since the first day I saw you at the cafe," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. His eyes were soft, unguarded, and my breath caught. He leaned in, and his lips met mine. The kiss was soft, tentative, and I felt like I was floating, my pulse a wild rhythm. My hands rested on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and for a moment, everything was perfect. But then it changed. His kisses grew harder, more demanding, his lips pressing against mine with an urgency that felt wrong. His hands moved over my shoulders, my waist, tugging at the hem of my shirt, his fingers brushing my skin. I froze, my breath catching, a cold knot forming in my stomach. I pulled back, my hands pushing against his chest. "Lucas, stop," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm not ready for this." His face shifted, the warmth replaced by something sharp, almost mocking. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. "Don't be such a child, Maya," he snapped, his voice edged with irritation. "Why'd you come here if you didn't want this?" The words hit like a slap, twisting my excitement into shame. I felt small, exposed, like I'd failed some test I didn't know I was taking. "I came to spend time with you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, my hands shaking in my lap. "To talk, to see the sunrise." He laughed, a cold, cutting sound that made my skin crawl. "Talking? Sunrises? That's not why people come to cabins, Maya." His tone was mocking, his charm gone, replaced by a hardness that made him a stranger. He leaned in again, his hand on my arm, his grip tighter than before, but I turned away, my heart pounding with fear and betrayal. "No," I said, louder now, pulling my arm free. I said stop. He stood abruptly, grabbing his keys from the table, the metal jangling in his hand. "Fine," he said, his voice hard, his eyes cold. "If you're going to act like a kid, I'll treat you like one." I'm going back to the village. Find your own way home. Panic surged through me, my breath shallow. Lucas, please, I said, standing, my voice breaking. It's the middle of the night. We're miles from town. I can't. He cut me off, already at the door, his back to me. You should have thought of that before you played games, he said, and then he was gone. The door slammed, the sound echoing in the small space like a gunshot. I heard his car start, the engine roaring, then fading into the distance, leaving only silence in its wake. The fire crackled, its warmth mocking my growing fear. It was 2 a.m, and I was alone in a strange cabin, miles from home, with no car, no bus until dawn, and no phone signal in the mountains. My chest tightened, my hands trembling as I sank onto the couch, hugging my knees. Tears came first, hot and unstoppable, streaming down my face as I replayed the night. How had I been so wrong about him? I'd trusted him, believed in the version of Lucas who listened, who cared, who saw me as more than the cafe girl. But that Lucas was a mirage, a mask he wore until it no longer served him. His words echoed in my mind. Don't be such a child. Why'd you come here? Each one a knife, cutting deeper into my confidence, my trust. I thought of my father's warnings, Maria's stories about Clara, Sophia's cautious texts. They'd all seen what I refused to, blinded by his charm, by my own need to be special. I cried for the girl who'd walked into this cabin, so full of hope, so unaware of the cost. But as the tears slowed, something else took their place. Anger. Anger at Lucas for treating me like I owed him, for turning my trust into a weapon. Anger at myself for being so naive, for ignoring every red flag, for thinking I could handle someone like him. I couldn't stay in the cabin. It felt like a trap, its walls closing in with every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the fire. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and betrayal, and I needed to move, to reclaim some piece of myself. I grabbed my jacket, thin and useless against the mountain chill, and stepped into the night. The forest was a wall of darkness, the air sharp with cold, slicing through my clothes like a blade. Owls hooted, their calls eerie and distant. Branches snapped underfoot, each sound amplifying my fear. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, a wolf, a stranger, my own panic. My sneakers meant for cafe shifts, not hiking, slipped on the uneven path, and soon my feet ached, then burned with blisters. I walked for an hour to reach the main road, my breath visible in the freezing air, my body shivering uncontrollably. The road was empty, no headlights, no help, just an endless stretch of asphalt under a sky heavy with stars. I kept going, toward the village, one agonizing step at a time, my legs heavy, my hands numb in my pockets. The night stretched on, endless and cruel. My mind churned with memories of Lucas's smile, his stories, the way he'd made me feel seen, only to discard me when I didn't bend to his will. I thought of my parents, asleep in their bed, unaware of my lie, trusting me to be safe. I thought of Maria, her warnings now a bitter truth, her face when she'd begged me to be careful. I thought of Sophia, who'd texted, "Be careful," like a lifeline I'd ignored. Each memory was a weight, but also a push to keep moving. I couldn't let Lucas's cruelty define me. I wouldn't. I was more than the girl he'd left behind, more than the shame and fear that clung to me now. 3 more hours passed, the sky lightening to a soft gray, then pink, the stars fading one by one. As the sun rose, painting the horizon, with streaks of gold and crimson, I saw the village lights in the distance, faint but real, like a beacon calling me home. Relief flooded me, mingled with exhaustion. My body screamed for rest, my feet raw, my throat dry, but I'd made it. I was alive, and I was stronger than I'd been when the night began. I didn't go home. I couldn't face my parents. Not yet. Not with the truth burning in my chest like a coal. Instead, I went to Sophia's house, a small cottage near the, school with ivy climbing its walls. I knocked, my hand trembling, and she answered in flannel pajamas, her hair a mess, her eyes widening when she saw me, shivering, disheveled, broken. "Maya, what happened?" she asked, pulling me inside, her voice thick with worry. I collapsed onto her couch, the cushions soft under my aching body, and the words spilled out between sobs. The festival, the cabin, Lucas's betrayal, the long walk home. She listened, her face shifting from shock to anger to tenderness. Her hand resting on mine. "That bastard," she muttered when I finished, her eyes fierce. "You're safe now, Maya. You're here." She hugged me, her arms a lifeline, and made me chamomile tea, the steam soothing my raw throat. She tucked a blanket around me, its weight a comfort, and let me sleep in her bed, the sheets smelling faintly of lavender. While I rested, she called. My parents, spinning a story about me falling asleep at her place after a movie marathon. It was another lie, but it gave me space to breathe, to process, to begin piecing myself back together. The next day, I dragged myself to the cafe, my body sore but my resolve like iron. I tied on my apron, poured coffee, and smiled at customers, but inside, I was a storm, anger, shame, and a fierce determination to reclaim my life. Lucas walked in at his usual time, bold as ever, and sat at table 5. "Black coffee," he said, his smile as charming as ever, his eyes sliding over me like nothing had happened, like he hadn't left me stranded, like he hadn't shattered my trust. Rage surged through me, hot and fierce, burning away the fear. I poured his coffee, my hand steady now, and then accidentally tipped the cup, splashing it across his jeans, the dark liquid soaking through. "Oops," I said, my voice flat, my eyes locked on his. "Clumsy me." He jumped up, furious, his charm cracking like thin ice. "Watch what you're doing, you stupid girl," he shouted, loud enough for the whole cafe to hear. Customers turned, their murmurs a quiet hum, forks pausing mid-bite. Mrs. Patel stepped from the kitchen, her small frame radiating authority, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. "Don't speak to my staff like that," she said, her voice calm but unyielding, sharp as a blade. "Leave my cafe, Lucas, now." He blinked, stunned. No one had ever kicked him out of anywhere. Not Lucas, the village's golden boy. "Your coffee's garbage anyway," he muttered, storming out, the bell jingling in his wake, a final note of his defeat. Mrs. Patel turned to me, her eyes soft but searching, her hands clasped in front of her apron. "Are you okay, Maya?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm, like she could see the storm inside me. I shook my head, tears threatening, my throat tight. "No," I admitted, my voice breaking, raw with honesty. "But I will be." She nodded, resting a hand on my shoulder, her touch warm and steady. "Take the rest of the day if you need it," she said. "You're stronger than you know." I stayed, needing the routine to ground me, the familiar clink of mugs and hum of conversation to tether me to something real. But her kindness, her belief in me, stayed with me, a reminder that I wasn't alone, that I could rebuild. That evening, I sat my parents down at the kitchen table, the air heavy with the scent of my mother's stew and the weight of what I needed to say. The table was worn, its surface scratched from years of meals, arguments, and laughter, a silent witness to our family's life. I took a breath, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, and told them everything: the festival, the lie, the cabin, Lucas's cruelty, the walk home. My voice shook, but I didn't stop, the words spilling out like a river breaking free. I braced for their anger, for disappointment, but instead my mother pulled me into a hug, her arms fierce, her breath warm against my hair. "That man should be ashamed," she said, her voice thick with emotion, her eyes wet with tears. My father's face was thunderous, his hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight. "I'll have a word with him," he said, his voice low, dangerous, the kind of tone that meant business. I shook my head, reaching for his hand. "No, Dad, it's over. I just want to move forward." He looked at me, his eyes softening, and nodded, his anger giving way to pride. "You're brave, Maya," he said, his voice rough, braver than I knew. Their love, their trust, steadied me like a lifeline, anchoring me as I began to heal. 2 weeks later, I made a decision that changed everything. I'd always dreamed of studying literature, of becoming a teacher, of sharing stories with children and helping them see the world through words. But I'd never thought I could leave the village. It felt too big, too risky, a betrayal of the life I'd always known. That night with Lucas, as awful as it was, showed me I couldn't stay stuck here, pouring coffee forever, my dreams locked away like books on a dusty shelf. I wanted more, for myself, for my future, for the person I could become. With Mrs. Patel's help, I applied to a university in the city, 200 kilometers away, a place I'd only seen in photos, its skyline a promise of possibility. She sat with me at the cafe after hours, the lights dim, the air smelling of coffee grounds and hope. She proofread my application, her pen marking corrections with care, and wrote a recommendation that made me sound like a star, her words glowing with belief in me. "You're smarter than you know, Maya," she said, her eyes warm, her voice steady. "The city needs people like you. The world needs people like you." To my disbelief, I was accepted, with a scholarship that covered most of my tuition, a miracle that felt like fate. In September, I packed my life into 2 suitcases, my books and clothes a heavy weight, and boarded a bus to the city, my heart a mix of fear, excitement, and a quiet, fierce determination. The city was a universe unto itself, a sprawl of glass towers, honking cars, and streets that pulsed with life. People rushed past in suits, headphones, and sneakers, their lives a mystery I wanted to unravel. The air smelled of exhaust, street, food, falafel, pizza, roasted nuts, and the faint tang of rain on concrete. Lights flashed everywhere, neon signs, traffic signals, the glow of phones in strangers' hands. It was loud, chaotic, overwhelming, nothing like the village's quiet rhythms. I rented a tiny room in a shared apartment with Lily, an art student, with blue hair, a nose ring, and a laugh that echoed through the walls. She was bold, unapologetic, and kind, welcoming me with a mug of tea and a tour of our cramped kitchen, its counters cluttered with paintbrushes and half-empty cereal boxes. "The city's a lot at first," she said, stirring honey into her cup, her nails painted black. "It'll chew you up if you let it, but it also gives you freedom. You can be whoever you want here, Maya." Her words were a spark, igniting a part of me I'd kept buried, a part that wanted to grow, to explore, to become. I threw myself into my studies, majoring in literature with the goal of teaching. My classes were a revelation, professors dissecting Shakespeare's sonnets, Woolf's stream of consciousness, Achebe's vivid portraits of Nigeria, their voices pulling me into worlds I'd only dreamed of. I spent hours in the university library, its shelves towering with books, the air heavy with the scent of ink and old paper, my notebook filled with scribbled notes, quotes, and dreams, lines from beloved, ideas for lesson plans, fragments of stories I wrote in secret. To cover books, food, and rent, I worked part-time at a bookstore near campus, a cozy shop with creaking floors, fairy lights, and shelves that reached the ceiling. I loved the quiet magic of it, helping customers find the perfect novel, shelving poetry under the glow of stained glass lamps, breathing in the scent of paper and possibility. I'd run my fingers over the spines, imagining my own stories on these shelves someday, a dream I barely dared to voice. That first year was hard. Homesickness hit like a wave, crashing over me when I least expected it. I'd call my mother, her voice crackling through the phone, and cry as she described the garden or Maria's latest sewing project. Bills piled up, the city's cost of living a constant pressure, and the pace was relentless. Classes, work, studying until midnight, then doing it all again. But it was also exhilarating. I joined a book club, where we debated The Handmaid's Tale over wine and laughed until our sides ached. I made friends. Amara, a biology major with a sharp wit, Leo, a theater student who quoted Oscar Wilde like it was his job. They saw me as Maya, the literature nerd, the girl with big dreams, not the cafe worker from a nowhere village. I felt myself growing stronger, more sure of who I was, my roots in the village grounding me even as I reached for new heights. Lucas faded from my thoughts, a bad memory I no longer carried, his shadow replaced by the light of my new life. One rainy evening, I finished my shift at the bookstore, my arms aching from shelving a new shipment of novels. I'd forgotten my umbrella, and the rain fell in silver sheets, drenching the streets, the city lights blurring into streaks of color. I huddled under the shop's awning, debating a sprint to the subway, my coat already damp. A man stopped beside me, holding a large green umbrella, its canopy shielding him from the downpour. "Need some help?" he asked, his voice kind, unhurried. He had warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, a gentle smile, and a blue sweater dotted with rain, the wool slightly frayed at the cuffs. "I'm Thomas," he said, adjusting the umbrella to cover us both. "I work at the music store across the street. I've seen you around, at the bookstore." I hesitated, my guard up after Lucas, my trust in strangers fragile, but his voice was calm, his posture open, like he wasn't trying to prove anything. "I'm Maya," I said, managing a small smile. "Thanks, but I'll wait it out." He glanced at the sky, rain dripping from the umbrella's edge. "Weather says it'll rain all night," he said, his tone light but earnest. "I'm heading to the subway. Want to share? No pressure." Something about him felt safe, honest, like he wasn't chasing an agenda. His eyes held no expectation, just a quiet offer of kindness. Distance, his arm steady as he held the umbrella high, ensuring I stayed dry. We talked about the bookstore, my love for novels, his job teaching piano at the music store. He was 24, from a small town not unlike my village, and had moved to the city 3 years ago to chase his dream of composing music. "Do you like books?" he asked, his voice curious, his glasses fogging slightly in the damp air. "Love them," I said, smiling, the tension in my chest easing. "They're like friends, always there when you need them, telling you stories when the world's too loud." He nodded, his eyes lighting up. "I feel that way about music. Every piece is a story, you know? A beginning, a middle, an end, all in notes." His passion was quiet, but real, and I found myself listening, drawn in by his sincerity. At the subway station, the platform buzzing with commuters, we realized we took the same line, just in opposite directions. The train's rumble echoed below, the air smelling of wet concrete and metal. Before parting, Thomas turned to me, his umbrella dripping onto the tiles. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" he asked, his voice steady but a little nervous, his hand adjusting his glasses. I paused, the memory of Lucas flickering briefly, but Thomas's kindness felt different, untainted by manipulation. "I prefer tea," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. His grin was warm, unguarded, lighting up his face. "Tea's perfect," he said. "There's a great spot near the bookstore. Wednesday after work?" I nodded, my heart lighter than it had been in months, a quiet hope stirring. "Wednesday it is," I said, and as I boarded my train, the doors hissing shut, I felt a spark of something new, something worth trusting. That Wednesday, I arrived at the tea shop, a cozy place with exposed brick walls and the warm glow of pendant lights. The air smelled of chamomile and cinnamon, and soft jazz played in the background, mingling with the clink of cups. Thomas was already there, at a table by the window, the rain-streaked glass framing the city's blur. 2 teapots sat waiting. One green, one black, steam curling from their spouts, a small plate of biscuits between them. "Didn't know what you liked," he said, a little sheepish, pushing his glasses up his nose, his sweater now a soft gray. The gesture, so small but thoughtful, made my chest ache with gratitude, a warmth spreading through me. "You didn't have to do that," I said, sitting across from him, my hands wrapping around the green tea's warmth. "I wanted to," he said simply, his smile steady, his eyes meeting mine with no hint of pretense. We talked for hours, the tea growing cold as we shared our lives. I told him about my dream to teach, my love for literature, the stories I wrote in secret, fragments of novels I kept in a notebook under my bed, too shy to share. He listened, his eyes steady, asking questions that showed he cared, about my Favorite books, why I loved teaching, what stories I wanted to tell. You should share your writing someday, he said, his voice earnest. I bet it's amazing. I laughed, brushing it off. They're not good enough, I said, but his belief in me planted a seed, a quiet encouragement I carried home. He told me about his childhood in a town where everyone knew his name, his passion for composers like Debussy and Chopin, his hope to compose his own music someday, pieces that told stories without words. What's your dream, Maya? He asked, his voice soft, his hands wrapped around his teacup. I hesitated, unused to the question, the weight of it settling in my chest. To teach kids, I said, my voice steadying as I spoke. To show them how stories can change the way they see the world, how they see themselves, and maybe to write something that matters. He smiled, his eyes warm. You'll do it, he said, and the certainty in his voice made me believe it, just for a moment. We started meeting regularly, our lives weaving together like threads in a tapestry. We visited museums, marveling at paintings and sculptures, our whispers echoing in grand halls as we debated Monet's brushstrokes or Rodin's forms. We went to concerts, Thomas explaining the nuances of each piece, how Beethoven's Fury roared, how Debussy's notes shimmered like water. I introduced him to my favorite authors, reading passages from Their Eyes Were Watching God as we sat in parks, leaves falling around us, the city's hum a distant backdrop. We explored markets, tasting street food, spicy dumplings, sugary, churros, our fingers brushing as we shared bites. He was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give, his presence a steady warmth. When he held my hand for the first time, walking through a crowded market, the air thick with the scent of roasted chestnuts, he asked, "Is this okay?" I nodded, my fingers curling around his, my heart full. His first kiss, months later, was gentle, a question rather than a demand, given on a quiet street under a street lamp's glow, the city soft around us. With Thomas, I felt safe, respected, seen. Not for what I could give, but for who I was. We'd spend evenings in my apartment, Lily teasing us as she painted in the next room, her music blaring through the walls. Thomas would play snippets of songs on his portable keyboard, his fingers dancing over the keys, while I read aloud from Wuthering Heights, our laughter mingling with the notes. We'd cook together, fumbling through recipes, burning rice, spilling sauce, then giving up and ordering pizza, our faces flushed with joy. He'd leave notes in my books, little messages tucked between pages. "This reminded me of you," or "Can't wait to see you." Small gestures that made my heart skip. I told him about the village, about my family, about the dreams I'd kept hidden for so long. He told me about his mother, a single parent who'd raised him with love and music, her strength a quiet force in his life. Our stories wove together, building something new, something real. Then one day, he didn't show up for a planned meetup at our favorite cafe, a small place with mismatched chairs and the best scones in the city. I waited an hour, stirring my tea until it went cold, my mind spiraling. Had I misjudged him, like I had Lucas? Was this another betrayal dressed in kindness, another promise broken? My hands shook as I texted him, no reply, and the silence was a weight, pressing against my chest. 3 days passed with no word, each one heavier than the last, my sleep fractured by worry. I went to the music store, my stomach knotted, the bell above the door jangling as I stepped inside. His colleague, a lanky guy with a nose ring, said Thomas wasn't working that week and wouldn't say why, his shrug dismissive. I left, my heart sinking, the city's noise a roar in my ears. A week later, a knock came at my apartment door, soft but insistent. I opened it and Thomas stood there, pale, with dark circles under his eyes, his usual warmth dimmed, his sweater rumpled. "I'm so sorry, Maya," he said, his voice raw, his hands twisting together. "My mom had a stroke. I had to rush home. No signal at the hospital. No way to reach you. I should have found a way. But it was chaos." Relief flooded, me washing away the fear, followed by concern. I stepped closer, my hand reaching for his. "Is she okay?" I asked, my voice soft, my eyes searching his. She's recovering, he said, his shoulders sagging. But it's been rough. She's stable now, but I'll need to visit her. More often, help her through rehab. I hugged him, my arms tight around him, his breath uneven against my shoulder. I was worried about you, I admitted, my voice muffled against his sweater. I thought you'd changed. Your mind about us. He pulled back, his eyes wide, his hands cupping my face. Never, he said, his voice fierce. I missed you every day, Maya, and I realized something important while I was away. My heart pounded, a mix of fear and hope. What? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He took a breath, his eyes steady, unguarded. I love you. Those words, so simple, sent a jolt of fear through me. The last time I thought someone cared, I'd ended up alone in the dark, my trust shattered, my heart bruised. But Thomas wasn't Lucas. He showed his love in quiet ways, remembering my favorite tea, listening to my fears, respecting my boundaries, showing up even when it was hard. It wasn't the wild rush I'd felt with Lucas, but something deeper, truer, built on trust, care, and shared moments. I looked into his eyes, saw the honesty there, the vulnerability, and felt my fear soften. I love you too, I said, my voice soft but sure. The words a promise to myself as much as to him. We stood there, holding each other, the city humming, outside, and I knew this was different. This was real. Years passed, each one a chapter in a story we wrote together. I graduated with my teaching degree, my cap and gown a symbol of dreams fought for and won. I started working at a primary school where I read Charlotte's Web and the Lion, The Witch and the Wardrobe to wide-eyed kids, their faces lighting up with wonder as they discovered new worlds. I'd watch them scribble their own stories, their pencils scratching paper, and feel a quiet pride, knowing I was helping them dream. Thomas opened a small music school, a bright space with pianos and guitars, where he taught students of all ages, his patience and passion filling the room. He'd come home with stories of a shy kid mastering their first song, or an adult rediscovering music after years away, his eyes bright with joy. We moved in together, our apartment a cozy blend of bookshelves and sheet music, novels stacked. Beside his upright piano, our lives intertwined in the smallest, sweetest ways. We'd cook dinner together, laughing over spilled sauce or botched recipes, the kitchen filled with the scent of garlic and herbs. We'd spend evenings reading, or playing music, Thomas at the piano, me curled up with. Dusk, the skyline glowing, our hands linked, talking about everything, our dreams, our fears, the life we wanted to build. He'd leave notes in my books, little messages tucked between pages. This reminded me of you, or can't wait to see you. Small gestures that made my heart skip. I'd write him poems, shyly slipping them into his sheet music, blushing when he read them aloud, his voice warm with love. Our love grew in the quiet moments, in the shared silences, in the way he'd hold me when I doubted myself, his arms a safe harbor. 2 years later, Thomas proposed. We were at a concert in the city park, the orchestra playing Debussy's Claire. De Lune, my favorite piece, its notes shimmering under a sky streaked with stars. The crowd was a sea of blankets and picnic baskets, the air warm with summer. Thomas was quieter than usual, his hand tight around mine, and I wondered if something was wrong. During the final chords, the music swelling, he turned to me, his wide eyes nervous but sure. He knelt, pulling a small ring from his pocket, its simple band glinting in the moonlight. Maya, he said, his voice steady despite the crowd around us. You brought words to my music, stories to my songs. You're my home, my heart. Will you marry me? Tears blurred my vision, my heart so full it ached. I nodded, whispering, yes, through happy sobs, and he slipped the ring onto my finger, his hands trembling. The crowd cheered, strangers clapping for our joy, and we kissed, the music fading into our laughter, the stars above us witnesses to our promise. We married in a garden, the air sweet with jasmine and roses, the sun warm on our faces. My family came from the village, my mother crying as she adjusted my veil, her hands soft against my cheeks. My father beamed, his gruff exterior softened by pride, his arms steady as he walked me down the aisle. Maria, my maid of honor, winked at me, her dress a soft blue, her laughter a reminder of our shared history. Thomas's mother, still recovering, smiled from her wheelchair, her eyes bright with love, her strength a quiet force. Lily, my blue-haired roommate turned lifelong friend, was there too, her grin as bold as ever, her camera snapping photos of every moment. The day was a blur of laughter, music, and love, a string quartet playing our favorite songs, tables laden with food, children running through the grass, their giggles echoing. We danced under fairy lights, Thomas's arms around me, his breath warm against my ear as he whispered, "I love you, Maya, always." I felt like the luckiest person alive, my heart full, my life a story I'd never dared to dream. Now, at 31, Thomas and I have been married 5 years. We bought a small house near my school, its walls lined with bookshelves, its living room home to Thomas's piano, its keys worn from daily use. The house is small but ours, filled with the smells of coffee and fresh paint, the sounds of music and laughter. We've planted a garden, a nod to my mother's wildflowers, and I spend mornings weeding, my hands in the dirt, my mind at peace. Last month, I found out I'm pregnant, a secret I carried for days, my heart racing with joy and fear. When I told Thomas I was nervous, my hands shaking as I showed him the test, its 2 lines, a quiet promise. He stared at it, his eyes wide, then pulled me into his arms, his laughter bright. That night, he sat at the piano and played a new piece, his fingers dancing over the keys, the melody soft and hopeful. "It's for our baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes shining. "They'll grow up with stories and songs, just like us." The thought of our child, of the life we're building, fills me with a joy so deep it feels like light, spilling over into every corner of my heart. Sometimes I hear about Lucas through Maria, who still lives in the village, her life a steady rhythm of sewing and family. His motorcycle shop failed, its windows boarded up, its chrome dreams rusted away. He drinks too much now, his nights spent at the village bar, his charm no longer enough to sustain him. He's been married twice, both unions brief and broken, and he lives alone in a small apartment above the bar, his life a string of regrets. I don't hate him, not anymore. I feel a quiet pity, a hope that he finds peace, a way to heal whatever drives his restlessness, his need to take without giving. That night at the cabin, as painful as it was a turning point for me. It forced me to see my own strength, to confront my naivety, to chase my dreams with a fierceness I didn't know I had. Without it, I might still be pouring coffee at the cafe, my dreams locked away, my life a shadow of what it could be. I might never have left the village, never have met Thomas, never have found the person I was meant to be. When it rains, Thomas and I share that green umbrella, its canopy worn but sturdy, walking side by side through the city, our laughter mingling with the patter of drops. The streets glisten, the lights reflecting in puddles, and we talk about our day, our dreams, the baby we'll soon meet. Life isn't perfect. We argue over bills, worry about the future, navigate the messiness of love and responsibility. But we face it together, with respect, with kindness, with a love that grows stronger each day, rooted in trust and care. I learned that one bad experience doesn't define you, doesn't close the door to joy. Real love doesn't hurt or scare you. It builds you up, holds you close, gives you room to grow. It's the quiet moments, Thomas's hand in mine, his music filling our home, our shared dreams for our child, that show me what love truly is. I learned that sometimes you have to walk through the dark to find your light, to discover your own strength, to build a life that's yours. If you're watching this, going through your own storm, hold on. Pain is temporary, like rain that passes to reveal the sun, its warmth waiting just beyond the clouds. Trust yourself, be patient, and the right people will come when you're ready, their presence a gift you'll recognize because of the dark you've walked through. Thank you for listening to my story, for letting me share this piece of my heart. I hope it brought you comfort, inspiration, or even a little help with your English practice. If it touched you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Your support means everything. A small spark that helps me keep sharing stories that might resonate with you, might remind you of your own strength. In the comments, share your own story. Have you ever had a tough moment that led to something beautiful, something unexpected? I'd love to hear from you, to know I'm not alone in this journey. I'll see you in the next video, with more stories, more hope, more light.